That's a way better intro than I could have done, so I'll just get right into it. So I'm going to talk about Android Auto. So before we get started, just a bit of an idea. So how many people in the room here are Android developers? Okay, and software developers in general? Okay, so there's not necessarily code, but there's a bit of technical talk. But I won't spend too much time on it. But if you want more information, just ask a question or come find me after, and I'll happy to give you any more info if what on here isn't enough. So so there's a bit of confusion in the industry about what exactly Android Auto is. So to start off, I'll sort of explain what it is and what it isn't. So it was sort of announced at Google I/O in 2014, a couple of years ago. And essentially what it is a way for you to safely use your device while you're driving. So, and it does this by mirroring whatever's happening on your phone to a dashboard display in your car. And in order to do it safely, it sort of limits the functionality that you're able to actually, or it limits your phone's functionality. So, you can't go. I don't know if people are still chasing Pokemon, but you can't do that if that's something you're interested in. And how it does this is that a lot of the functionality is controlled by voice control. So just keep your eyes on the road, and so you're not like kind of driving and squinting trying to press a little button somewhere. Now, what Android Auto isn't is it's not its own version of Android, and I think this is where a lot of the confusion comes in. It's not a version of Android that's running on your car. It's basically just a sort of a second screen for your phone. There's no Google Play Store. You can't download any apps into your car, sort of thing. You can only really use apps that have been configured for Android Auto that are already existing on your phone. So that's sort of just a bit of clarification on what exactly it is. And this is sort of just a visual representation of sort of what I was talking about. So we can see we've got a guy's plugged in his phone to his car, and we've got the screen on the dashboard there, and it's sort of the whole point of Android Auto is to give you sort of information, contextual information that you might need while you're driving that is being served up from your phone. So, for example, we've got some directions to LAX, and it's 79 degrees in LA, a lot warmer than here, so that's cool. But you'll notice that, there's no, anyone familiar with an Android phone, there's no app drawer, there's no way to like go and try and launch a specific app or anything like that. Android Auto sort of gives you the information that it thinks you need while you're driving. And the whole point of it is to prevent this, which I think is probably, we can all agree, is a good thing.
Yeah, you should definitely be keying with two hands.
Yeah, exactly. But let's look at that phone. That picture's got to be about 6 years old. That's an old phone. I'd love to be that guy who was posing in that, and like how many takes that took. That would have been really funny. So I sort of mentioned that it kind of limits the functionality of your phone. So it limits it to 5 key things. So we've got navigation, so GPS, directions on wherever you're going. You can make phone calls, so send and receive phone calls. You can send and receive text messages or any sort of chat message, but no email. So it's just short form messaging. So you can't dictate a long email or anything like that. You can control music or podcasts or the radio or anything else you might be listening to. And you can do web searches if there's something you need to know while you're driving. And just the basic requirements of it to use this is that you need an Android device running 5.0 or above, which probably most people in this room who have an Android device, that's not an issue. You download the Android Auto app from the Play Store onto your phone, and that is what sort of does the communication between your car and your phone. You need a car with an Android Auto head unit, which is what we saw in the previous picture, just a sort of a unit that sits in your dashboard. And just as a bit of trivia, the 2015 Hyundai Sonata was the first car to actually implement that. there are aftermarket units that you can get and install yourself, and more and more as time goes on, more and more cars are actually being rolled out with the head units in them. If you look at the Google website, they basically list like every manufacturer as supporting Android Auto, which in practice it's not quite true. I mean, they may in theory be working on it, but at the moment there's only a few cars that actually have it. I've only actually seen one. My uncle has a Volkswagen and it has it, which is kind of cool. And then at I/O this year, Google had announced that you wouldn't actually need a head unit to run Android Auto, and the planned date was late 2016, which we're obviously rapidly approaching, but there's no news on that. But essentially, how that would work is that you can use your phone, and the phone gets put into what's called auto mode, where the phone itself limits its functionality, and I guess you're just meant to sort of put it in like a car mount on your, through whatever, either through the vent or through the CD player or whatever. And so then you get sort of the functionality of Android Auto without having a head unit. But that, as of yet, that hasn't been released, but apparently that's on its way. So the basic operation of how this works, you connect your phone to the car and with a USB cable, and the phone goes into what's called auto mode, where it basically just completely limits the functionality. You can't really do anything, and now everything that happens on your phone that is important is routed to the dashboard display. The head unit displays a series of cards that, as you saw in the previous picture, that gives you info that you might need at any given time, so directions maybe on how to get home from wherever you are. There'd be a card saying, like, if you were listening to music, you'd have the option to pause, and it would just tell you what you're listening to. If you end up getting a text message, you'd get a message saying, okay, now I have a message, and I can press on it and listen to it. So things like that, things that you might actually be interested in. There's a little microphone button on the screen, and that's sort of what triggers the voice actions. Unfortunately, you can't do like an OK Google like you can with your phone to do a search, which kind of always confused me a little bit, because I would think that would be the ideal spot to do it, because you don't want to be touching anything, but anyway. And there is, at the bottom of the screen, there is something called an activity bar, and that is used to start specific things. So again, that are within the functionality. So that would be navigation, your phone, playing music, or to get info specifically about your car. So we go back to this previous picture, and to just give a bit of context as to what I was saying. As you can see on the screen, we've got this series of cards up there, which are the info that you're meant to need at this point, and those kind of scroll up and down depending on how many there are on the screen. Way in the corner there with the little microphone, that's the button that starts the voice actions. So you can press on that and say something like, call whoever, and it will call them, or send a message to whoever, and it will do so, or navigate home, sort of thing. We've got the activity bar along the bottom there, and so going from left to right, pressing on those icons. Left is navigation, then we've got the phone, obviously. The one in the middle, the circle, that if anyone uses an Android, that's pretty obvious. That takes you back to the home screen, which is what we're actually looking at in this picture, so sort of just the series of cards. We've got music with the headphones, and on the far right, we've got sort of a diagnostic screen, and that is meant to, the developer of the car, or the manufacturer of the car, can sort of serve up information about the car. So things maybe like engine, oil levels or things like that. Things about what you might want to know about your car that maybe isn't available that isn't already available on the dashboard. And you'll sort of see that on the right there, or sorry, on my right, on the left, the phone has been put into auto mode. So you've just got that screen that says Android Auto, and you can't do anything. Like, that's the way it looks. So you can't get rid of that. You can't open anything else. Like, that's sort of, your phone is now frozen, and you can't really do much with it. And because now everything is being routed through the car. And so just give a bit of a tour here through these different screens. We've got. So this is the home screen. This is what you see when you first plug in your phone. You can see we've got a bunch of different cards, sort of giving me info on something I might need. I can see it's going to take me 16 minutes to get home, and if I were to actually press on that car, the navigation would start. So it would the GPS would start and it would give me turn-by-turn direction on how to get home. It's also going to tell me it's going to take 27 minutes to get to my softball game. I've got a message from my friend Carl, and I had a recent call, which I probably ignored. And so this is just what's sort of, this is giving me info on anything that I can actually take action on in the car. And another thing that you can sort of take notice is that on each one of these cards, there's a little icon sort of on the far left, and that gives a bit of context as to what will actually happen when you press that card. So for example, if I were to press the card that has the message from Carl, it would actually play out his message. It would read it out, and I could listen to it and then respond with my voice if I wanted to, and that's indicated by the speaker. The one above it, if I press it, it would actually call that number, and then these ones have the little navigation icon, so if I pressed one of those, it would actually start giving me directions on where I was going.
Quick question. Will
Yep.
you only show notifications for apps that support notifications or that are supported by Android apps?
Yeah. So yeah, that's coming, but yeah, you have to get your app to support auto, and then they'll show up. So if we were to touch speaking about navigation here, if we were to touch, say, the card that says 18 minutes to home, this is the screen that we would be presented with. We'd get, I'm sure everyone's seen this a million times. It's just like the Google Maps navigation, and it would say, okay, I'm going south on Yonge Street, and it's going to take me 7 kilometers. It's going to take me 18 minutes, and as you drive, obviously, it updates and gives you directions. If we go and want to make an actual phone call, we pressed on this button right here. The first screen that we would get is on the left, which is just a list of any of the recent calls that I've either made or received. And if I actually started calling one of them, then you'd get the screen on the right, where it's like, okay, like a phone call is actually in progress, and obviously it takes up the whole screen, can't do much else. You could also, other than just pressing one of those cards on the left to trigger the phone call, you could also do that by voice. You could actually hit the microphone and say, call whoever, and it would start, it would start the phone call, and you'd end up with this screen right here. For messaging, if you're driving along and you get, let's say you're driving along and I get a message from my friend Carl, which is sort of shown on the left there. What you would get is a sort of, everyone's familiar with, any Android user is familiar with that sort of heads-up notification. So I'd get a little notification saying that, okay, Carl's now sent me a message. There's a couple things I can do with it. If I actually touch on the notification while it's sitting there, then it will read out the message and I can act on it. If I don't do anything, then that message goes away after a few seconds and the card goes back into the list in an order that Google thinks is appropriate. So if it's, usually they sort of put the messages at the bottom and they put the directions at the top, which is probably a good thing. And so that message would just slide into the card here, and I could touch on that card, and then it would read his message at any point. And I could respond if I wanted to at whatever time, if it was urgent or whatever time I felt necessary. Moving along, if I went to audio, this will support, you'll get a choice of starting to play any audio app that supports Android Auto. So if I was listening to a podcast on the left, that's sort of the screen that you'd be presented with. Any of the Android developers in the room, Fragmented's a really good Android podcast. If you guys are nodding, I'm sure you know that already. So that would sort of give you, I'd be listening to that. If I listened to music, you get the screen on the right. And just as a bit of a side note, one thing you notice is that the layouts of both screens, even though they're two different apps, the layouts are almost identical. And I mean, other than things like colors are different and the icons are different for the certain actions. But this is one of the things that's a bit different about Android Auto compared to regular Android development, is that there's no actual UI code. You're not doing any layouts, you're not doing anything like that. The UI is completely rendered by Auto, and all you really do is you kind of do the plumbing. You do like the back end, which tells Android Auto that your app is available to be shown on Android Auto, and you can specify certain things like colors or icons, things like that, but the actual layout of the screen will be the same. And it's the reason for that is that they're trying to sort of create, I guess, a consistent experience, and especially in a situation where they don't want you searching around for something because you're supposed to be focusing on driving. So they don't want you searching around in a specific app to see, like, to try and find some functionality that may exist in one app but not in another. So that's a bit of a overview of what Auto is. So I've got a demo here where we can actually pretend, I guess, that we're in a car with Android Auto. That's not it. So this is called the desktop head unit, and what this is just essentially an emulator, but this is actually what you would see if you had Android Auto in your car and you plugged in your phone. So I've got my phone actually plugged in here, and as you can see, I've got the Android Auto screen that I can't do anything. My phone's dead, and anything that I can see is now put onto here. And so as you can see, we've got a few different cards here. I'm telling me it's going to take 21 minutes to get home. I've got a message from a friend of mine, and if we scroll down, it's going to take me 18 minutes to get to a pizza place. And so this is currently stuff that's on my phone that it feels is something I'm going to need. So say I wanted to get home. So I would just, actually, I'll do the pizza place instead. That's probably more valuable for everyone here. But if I was just to say click on that, it would come up and it would say, okay, so it's got my current location, and it's saying, okay, we're going to make a right on, we're going to go on King Street West, and eventually we're going to make a right. Well, I guess we're going to get on King and then make a right, and it's going to tell we're going to be there in 18 minutes. So, and I mean, I'm sure everyone's sort of seen this before. This is just sort of standard Android navigation. You can also say I wanted to go somewhere else other than this pizza place. And so first of all, say I wanted to stop this. That can be done by just hitting this X right here, and that'll kill the navigation, and then it just gives you it just gives you a.
On your way home, there's the usual traffic. The route via Don Valley Parkway North is the fastest.
There we go. All right. That's surprising. It's usually a parking lot, but anyway. So and now you all know where I live, so even better. So yeah, so it's giving me this information because it's like, okay, you know what? It's 7:30 at night. I'm in my car. Probably I'm going home. So it's like, okay, it's going to give you this information. This is how you get home. Say I wanted to go somewhere else. Say I want to go to the Air Canada Centre. You can easily just do that by just clicking on this little microphone. Navigate to the Air Canada Centre.
Okay, Air Canada Centre. Here we go.
And so, yeah, and so then it would just give us directions on how to get there. It's going to take 12 minutes, all that kind of stuff. And so, and obviously now we've got those cards there, whereas say I want to get back there at some point, I can click on there and it will start giving me directions. If I want to make a phone call, it's pretty easy. I can just click up here. Call Carl.
Calling Carl Lee, mobile.
And we got there, and now you have a picture of my friend Carl, which I'm sure he's really happy that you just saw. So yeah, I hope that's not still dialing. No, I think we're good. Anyway, so yeah, similar sort of thing. Say I'm driving along, say I want to send him a message instead, because I didn't want to call him because nobody calls anyone anymore. Text Carl.
Text Carl Lee, sure. What's the message?
Hey, how's it going?
Here's your text to Carl Lee. Hey, how's it going? Do you want to send it or change it?
Send it.
Okay. Message sent.
So yeah, so I've now just sent a message to Carl, and it's all actually been done through my phone. So the car isn't really doing anything. All it's really doing is relaying the info that I'm giving to my phone. My phone's is what is actually doing the work. And just to sort of round out the demo, if I wanted to play some music, for example, or listen to something, this would have been like the last thing I listened to. but say I'm not in like a Zeppelin sort of mood. Play White Stripes.
Okay, asking to play music.
There we go. So yeah, so it's all like pretty self-explanatory, or pretty easy. It's just everything can be done by voice actions, and once things are going, you've got sort of big touch targets for things that for any action that you want to do. Like if I want to play the music, if I want to pause it, etc. Everything's really easy to do and easy to get to. The one thing that isn't so easy and kind of goes against the whole process of Android Auto is, say I want to play specific music, a specific song. You can do that by going into this sort of, or the navigation drawer over here. Going into there, you can actually get into something specific. So say I wanted to listen to, I don't know, like one of the Google Play radio stations, something like classic rock or something along those lines. I can sort of scroll through here and pick something I want, which in theory is great. You probably should be doing this when you're not driving, like when you stopped over, but it does give you the option as well to actually do stuff and not just random things on your voice. If there's something specific you want to do, you can. And so that's sort of a demo of what Android Auto is. Before I move on, any questions? Anything else you want to see? Anything you want to try? Like while we've got this up and running?
So the voice activation, it's not ongoing. It's every time you need to do a voice activation.
That's right. So you'd kick off everything by just clicking the microphone icon in the top right. It'd probably be better if you could just do like sort of an OK Google hot word. That'd probably make more sense. But at the moment, you actually have to press the button to start that.
Do you think they'll develop that with the OK Google?
I hope so. To be honest, I don't know exactly why it hasn't been developed. I guess maybe they figure. Actually, I don't even know. I guess they figure people like maybe it figures if you're listening to music or something, it's maybe hard to pick up like your voice like based on music if there's noise in the car. But that's really all I can think of. I'm not quite sure why else.
Sorry, maybe you mentioned this, but if your car doesn't have a smart dashboard, but you have your phone plugged in with auxiliary, can your phone act as the display?
So it will be able to do that eventually. Google was saying that in late 2016, it was supposed to be able to do that. So as of yet, or as of now, you can't. But at some point, yes, you will be able to put your phone into auto mode. So instead of seeing this screen with just the Android Auto, you'd actually see this. And so your phone would just be mirrored, and then you'd just kind of mount your phone on whatever mount you have in your car.
But it's probably worth noting, even now with the current releases that they've done this summer, if you put your phone up on a dashboard mount, it handles the navigation much like this.
Mm-hmm.
It responds to OK Google.
Oh, for sure,
Say,
for sure.
Remind me to do this when I'm at Home Depot, and it puts the memory in.
Yeah, for sure. And actually, in a lot of ways, like your phone might be better suited for what you're trying to do than Android Auto specifically. But because you can do just sort of the voice keywords. But yeah, you will be able to have your phone sort of display this UI and have these sort of things at some point. Yes.
So can you use an Android Auto and an Android Wear device at the same time? Or if you're doing Auto, does it disable all the Wear functionality?
That's a good question. Let's check.
Does anyone know how to wear a device?
Yeah, let's check. I can start music. There we go. All right, so I guess I can. All right, cool. Yes.
Continuing on that, will you get notifications on both of those at the same time?
I believe. See, I would think that you would, but now yeah, okay, yes, you will. So I've still got notifications on here that you can see on there. So I've got like the message from my friend Matt is there, that kind of thing. So I imagine. I mean, if someone wants to send me a message, we can test it out. But I imagine so. Yeah.
So what other ways to get out of the Android except from disconnecting? Is there like a software in the car? Say out of this or?
No, as far as I know, as soon as when you're plugged in, it's on. When you're not plugged in, it's off. And it's really at this stage, it's really sort of other than this functionality right here, which gives you information about your car. Everything that you need to do runs through your phone anyway. So it's when it's not plugged in, it kind of gives you just a big screen with a clock on it and that sort of thing. But nothing too exciting.
So with the tight restrictions that we had, I understand why. Where do you think are the opportunities for application developers? I mean, unless you're in a music provider or you're going to compete with Google Maps and stuff.
Yeah, it's definitely limited at the moment. I'm going to talk about a bit more about that in a bit, but it is definitely limited at the moment. Yes.
I was going to ask, is there support or plan to support other navigation services? I was thinking in particular, say if I want to use Waze, for example.
Yeah. I don't know offhand. I imagine if it's not Google, probably not. But yeah, Waze is Google, I guess. So I imagine. But yeah, I don't know offhand. But yes.
So Bill, I'm sort of not confused with technology, but so when you're talking, when you go on voice, you're suggesting going into the cloud and the server is doing all the work, and it's.
Sorry, say that again.
So when you press the microphone button and you're speaking to Google, you're going out onto the server and somewhere, and it's interacting with your phone.
Yes.
It's not actually technically the voice processing isn't controlling the phone, so you're actually using the cloud to control the phone.
So it's the voice recognition is it's all the routing is all sort of done through your phone. So it would be the phone is what's going out and connecting and to wherever they're doing the voice recognition. So what will happen is when you speak a message, and you press that thing and it gets sort of your reply or your command. That command gets sent to your phone. Your phone does sort of all the crunching and like all the data crunching. It takes your response. It sends it off to whatever speech recognition platform they're using, or if it's just local on the phone, is doing that. And then it gets its info and sends it back to be displayed here. It's sort of how it works. At least that's my understanding. Okay, cool. So, okay, so we've talked a lot about what Android Auto is, what it can do, what it can't do, that sort of thing. So now we can start talking about, okay, so now if you want to actually make an app for this, what can you do? What are your opportunities? How do you actually go about doing this? So developing an app for Auto at the moment, it's a bit misleading because you're not necessarily making an Android Auto app. What you're doing is you're extending an app that you've already created and making it work on Android Auto. So that would be similar to if anyone's worked with Android Wear or with Chromecast, it's sort of a similar sort of thing. You're taking an app that already exists and you're extending its functionality so that it can also be used on this separate platform. And so currently, and this goes back to your question, currently you can only actually extend an app that is either an audio app or a messaging app. So, which, I mean, it makes sense because at the moment you've got, I mean, playing music and maybe sending a message are two things that you could do hands-free in a car. And I'm imagining this, there are, obviously I don't know the plans or or I don't know the plans in depth because I don't work at Google, but there is plans to extend this functionality and allow for more people in case maybe you made a navigation app, maybe you've got, I don't know, I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but if you had something else that you feel might suit well in a car, that functionality will be available at some point, but at the moment, it's sort of audio or messaging, and if you've got an app that does one of those, then you're good to go. Your app has to target Lollipop or above, which most apps do. I don't see that being a big issue. And just another thing that I mentioned earlier is you don't actually, there's no UI code. You're not writing you're not designing any layouts, you're not doing anything like that, which is a big part of Android development, but in this situation, you're not actually doing any of that. All you're really doing is stuff behind the scenes to get your app working on Android Auto. So I'll kind of go through this quick. If anyone has any questions, feel free to ask sort of at the end or come talk to me. But in order to make your app available for Android Auto, you have to create an auto description config file, which is just an XML file which says that it either uses media, which is audio, or notification, which is messaging. I suppose you could do both, and you could notify a user anytime you change a song, but they'd probably hate you and never use it. But you create that file, and you put it in your Android manifest in the application tag, and you reference that file in your application tag, and then Android Auto will recognize that your app is available in whatever category you specified. And so now that we've got that, let's actually talk about how you do the two. So we've got audio and you've got messaging apps. So specifically for an audio app, the big thing you need to do is you need to create a service which inherits from Media Browser Service, which is provided by the framework. And you do this for a few reasons. One is to provide the content hierarchy of the files that you want to play. So for example, if you're developing a podcast app, you need to go through Media Browser Service and tell Android Auto where to find your podcast files, and so that you'll have an idea of what stuff to play. So you're like, okay, search here, play this stuff. And it also allows you to implement the controls based on what a user does on the screen. So if a user hits play, then you're going to get a callback to an on-play method. And in your play method, you'd specifically say what your app needs to do. So in this case, it would be start playback of a specific song. Same thing with pause. I mean, stop, rewind, or skip ahead, skip back. It's all pretty self-explanatory. But what you do is you just need to override those methods and to say that, okay, when a user presses a button, that you get a callback through that Media Browser or through that service, which tells you to start and stop your thing. And you can also register through voice actions with an intent filter in the manifest file. So you can register for things like through audio voice actions like start music, stop music, that sort of thing, and then in a broadcast receiver do your actual commands to get your app doing what it needs to do. So that's kind of a high-level overview of audio apps. For messaging, it's a bit different. So if anyone has worked with Android Wear before, in order to extend to get enhanced notifications in Android Wear, you take your existing notification and you extend it with a Wear extender object. With Auto, it's the same thing, except you use a car extender. And so in this case, what it does is that's what actually gets your notification on the Android Auto screen. So Android Wear is a little different because Android Wear everything shows up, but it's just specifically when if you extend your notification with a car extender, then it shows up on the Android Auto screen. And when a user actually interacts with those notifications, the system will generate intents and send them out, and you can catch those intents with a broadcast receiver and actually perform actions based on those. So for example, if someone sends a message with their voice, which I forgot to do in the demo, but anyway, oh no, I did. I'm sorry, never mind. I sent a message to Carl. Never mind. And so, for example, in that example, when I send the message to Carl, that my voice gets sent in an intent to my app, and in the broadcast receiver, I can catch that intent. I can take out in the intent's data. I can actually parse out that response, and I can take that response, and then I can actually use my app to send that message. So Android Auto isn't really doing much other than some plumbing. It's just taking the voice, sending it, and then my app is what's doing the actual sending of the message itself. And so it is, and you can do other things like when you actually read a message or listen to a message, you get a similar intent, and then you can actually mark the message as read and dismiss the notification, things like that, just to keep your app synced with what is going on the actual screen of Auto. So I went through that pretty quick, but again, if you have any questions, feel free to come talk to me. We can talk more about it. So so you've got your app, it's ready for Auto. So now how do you actually go about testing it and distributing it? So the head unit is what I did the demo on. That lets you test Android Auto functionality. So you can send yourself messages and see how the response works. You can play music and see how it responds. And it's quite easy to set up. You can just download it through the SDK manager. Like any other component, it hasn't been updated in like 8 months, so it's pretty easy. There's a couple commands you have to run to get it up and running, but all those instructions are in this link right here, and I'll make sure these slides are available. But it's in the link right there. It gives you information on how to get everything set up. Pretty quick. It does require a physical device, so you can't use an emulator with the Auto emulator. You actually have to have a physical device plugged in. And yeah, you use your computer's microphone to do the voice commands, as we all saw. Or if you've got a computer that doesn't have a microphone, if it's not a laptop, for example, there is a way to enter commands through the terminal, so like play music or navigate somewhere, and that will actually do the same thing as your voice. So you've gone through and you've tested it and everything's wonderful and you want to publish it. So there's a couple of things that you need to sort of keep in mind when doing that. Before you publish an app, you need to take a look at the Auto App Quality Checklist. And this is, essentially it's just a giant list of things that you can't do or that your app can't do. And as long as it doesn't do any of those things, it's probably going to get approved. So for example, it has to support voice actions. It only sends out pertinent notifications. It can't spam a user with notifications. You can't do any sort of long form messaging, so no emails. And another thing which you sort of notice is that any series of touch actions, getting from the moment that you press a shortcut on the activity bar, or you go through an action, from that point where you start to do that to the point where the end result happens. So for example, if you're playing a specific song, from the time that you click the music button to go into and actually find your song, it has to take less than 6 touches. If it takes more than that, it thinks you're spending way too much time on the screen, not looking at the road, and so that's not going to, and so it will get denied for that reason. A couple other things which at the moment aren't too applicable, because Android Auto at the moment is a bit limited, and there is no UI code, but I imagine that these are in here for future reference as the platform expands. But I mean, no ads, no animations, no scrolling text, nothing to take the user's eye off the road, no games, which I think is makes sense. So yeah, as I say, not quite relevant right now because you couldn't do that anyway if you wanted to, but as the platform expands, I imagine these rules are in place now, and then for the fact that when the platform expands, they're there. And if you want to, so you've gone through and everything's great and you want to distribute it, there's a couple steps also in the distribution you need to be aware of. Any app that you submit has to be put through a driver safety review, which takes a little longer than the typical couple of hours that all us Android developers are used to and make iOS developers jealous. It's going to take, it can take anywhere from, I think the average times are I think the average time is a couple days, but because it actually involves someone to actually sit down and look at it. Or at least that's what they say. Who knows if they're actually looking at it, but that's what they say. And so this also counts for updates as well. So if you've got if you're the developer of WhatsApp, for example, if you release the app with Android Auto in it, if you fail the auto checklist, your update is not going to get published. So if you have anything else riding in that update, it's not going to get published until the auto stuff is fixed. So it's just something to keep in mind. So when you're starting with Android Auto, kind of maybe makes sense to do an update that is auto and nothing else, just to make sure that you sort of pass those tests and your users aren't waiting on any other sort of feature that you think they should have. And if you happen to fail the review, then you get an email with a list of deficiencies that you need to fix, and then you can resubmit it and go through the whole process again. And it's for this reason that the official recommendation is to use the alpha or beta channels for the reviewing, so and for testing as well. So you can upload an app in alpha beta, it will go through the review process, and then once it's actually approved, then you can go ahead and just push it to production, and there's no surprises, and you know that everything's going to be fine. So if you want to learn more about Auto, there's a bunch of different resources. There's the Android Auto developer site, which has a lot of really good info. We've got there's a couple of dev bites about Android Auto. They're a little old. They're about a year old, but the information is still relevant and it's pretty good. There is a Udacity course on Android Auto. It's free. It's a bit limited just because as you've sort of gotten, I imagine you picked up on this talk, there's not, at the moment, the way Auto is, there's not a ton of opportunity, but if you're outside of the messaging and auto space, or sorry, messaging and audio space. But if you've got an app like that and you want to do it, there's a pretty good course for that. And then a lot of information about how to distribute to Android Auto, just some stuff that I was talking about previously. And there's an open source example that Google's released a couple years ago called the Universal Music Player. And all it is just a music player. It's a really bare bones music player. But the whole reason they released it was an open source example on how to make an existing app work with a bunch of different platforms. So it's got examples on how to make this music player work for Android Auto, Android Wear, Chromecast, Android TV, I believe. So even if you're interested in one of those other platforms, this is a good place to look because it's got up-to-date code on how to actually get your apps working on one of these platforms. And that's it. I really appreciate you guys coming out. I hope this was helpful. And yeah, any questions, I'm happy to answer. Okay, well, thanks a lot, guys. Really appreciate it.